All right, Dr. Stan Tatkin, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for inviting me, Connor.
You bet. I'm honored to get a chance to chat with you. And anytime that I've listened to your podcasts with other people, I think my friend Mark Groves interviewed you last year, and you guys had a great conversation. I thought that was wonderful.
Mark.
He's a funny character. He's a funny dude. Well, let's dive straight in. You talk a lot about secure functioning.
Yes.
So secure functioning in relationships. I think that'll probably be a good place for us to start of just the groundwork. Can you explain what that means for folks and maybe what gets in the way of secure functioning happening?
Oh, that's fun. Okay, well, secure functioning isn't the same as attachment, right? I'm big on attachment, but here I'm not talking about attachment. I'm talking about social contract theory. So secure functioning is a set of social contracts between people in a voluntary union of equals, unless they decide otherwise. So basically, secure functioning is more like teams. Right? It's a team sport of interdependence. And the interdependence here means that if you and I were in that union, we would have to have the same things to gain and the same things to lose, which would make us honest players and would also lead to full collaboration and cooperation, even under stress. So secure functioning is, like I said, a set of these principles or social contracts or rules or covenants or vows or whatever you want to call them that first and foremost protects us from each other. So the first part of this is governance. Do we have permission to govern each other and to enforce things that we both agree on, such as things that we never want to happen that would be destructive to us, and things that we want happen that would be an upgrade to our lives. So we can, since relationship is an invention, it doesn't exist in the physical world, we make it up. We make most everything up, right? The problem is that couples don't make up the same things. They don't design this together, and like other unions will. So they have no shared purpose. They have no shared vision of why they exist. What's the point of their relationship apart from emotion, right? We're talking about purpose. So secure functioning is a purpose-centered relationship of equals, creating agreements based on fairness, justice, and mutual sensitivity, where both buy into the agreements, and they're seen as hard and fast after they're done properly. And this actually makes them effective, makes partners effective, right? And keeps them out of war with each other.
That seems to be one of the main challenges for a lot of couples in today's day and age.
Most.
I think one of the core tenets is this notion of mutual protection.
Yeah.
I would love for you to speak on that, because I think that in the couples that I see, and then some of the challenges that sort of flare up within modern relationships, mutual protection certainly does not seem to happen. So I'd love for you to contextualize that for the listener, and then maybe talk about how that can happen.
Can I hold that for a second, but then answer
Sure.
the second part of your last question, which is,
Yes.
I think, why doesn't it secure functioning happen for the most part with humans? And that goes really to the nature of the human primate, which is us. On a good day, we can be wonderful. On a bad day, you may not want to be near us because we tend to be pro-self and not pro-relationship or pro-social under stress or in distress. And so we have to deal with our nature, which is fundamentally moody and fickle and warlike, aggressive, opportunistic, easily influenced by groups, xenophobic, exploitive. What could go wrong, right? And so in order to keep us in line, and it's been this way since our very beginnings, we have to have norms, rules, laws, principles, ways to keep us from doing what we do best, which is war. And that has to do with our survival instinct and the way our brain is organized. So we are very easily threatened. And that happens even with your own children. It could happen with your partner. It could happen with your parents. Our survival instinct knows no difference between people, things, objects, animals. It just reacts. And so that's another reason for secure functioning. It gives us a way to guarantee safety and security in a world that won't, right?
Mm-hmm.
That can't. And so by agreement, we can guarantee things just by saying so. This is what we're going to do, and this is what we're not going to do. So we have each other's backs. We protect each other in public and private at all times. We come first before everything and everyone else. Why? Again, this is an invention. It's an imagination, right? Because everything we decide, everything and everyone depends on us being happy and being effective with each other. So that's a choice. That's an imagination. That's creating something greater than oneself, which we know human beings always do better when they believe in something greater than themselves. So it's all prevention, basically. Prevention of what we do when our devils come out, which is going to happen.
Yeah, as you're saying some of that, I think what pops up, because I'm always trying to put myself in the seat of the listener that's tuning into our conversation, and I can imagine myself maybe, a decade ago or less even, and thinking, oh well, but I've got these attachment issues. I'm an anxious attachment. I'm a disorganized. I'm avoidant, or I'm ADHD. Those types of things that maybe we've been pathologized or diagnosed with, and kind of getting in the way. How does somebody approach secure functioning with the predisposition of some of the labels that they've acquired along the way?
When we're talking about psychopathology in this context of teamwork, of organization, of people working together to survive and thrive. ADHD, islands, anchors, ways, or avoidance, or whatever, is thinking too small, because the biggest problem is the nature of being human primates. All of us, alone, just that, who we are as animals and have been, knows no gender, sex, culture, place, location. We all have the same problems in different areas, maybe more amplified than others, right? Pathology, we might think of as an amplification of the human condition, right? And a certain aspect of it, same with neurodivergence, same with everything. But we have to look at the human condition as first and foremost the problem of getting along continually with others in a way that doesn't expose us to the problems that we have with getting along with others that are inherent in our species. So I think that is the best place to look when we're looking at unions, not individuals, but unions. That flattens the field and makes us all basically on the same level, right? Because we have to survive. We have to work together to do that, perhaps. We have to work together to create something. We've always had to do that. And how effective we are is how much we're willing to adapt to that situation, and how much we're willing to override our primitive impulses in order to get along, because we want to win. We want to make money. We want to succeed. We want to survive, right? But there's a shared purpose that flattens the field and makes us all the same, pretty much, because we have the same interests in mind. As soon as we don't have the same interests in mind, what do you think we do? We do what we're doing now in the country. We otherize, we fragment, we tribalize. We have no shared purpose or vision anymore. And so that is what leads to civil war in a country, always. But it's same thing in a family, same thing in a couple, right? Without that, they're going to start to pick at each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I worked at Apple, because I worked at Apple for a number
I wish you
of
still
years.
did, because I want some swag.
Some swag. I do actually have like an Apple backpack, from Cupertino, stashed away in my stuff. Yeah, I kept some of the swag and the souvenirs from working there. A ball cap, these you can't buy unless you're an employee.
Right.
The special perks, but when I worked there, they had this notion that you assume positive intent, whether it's with the customer or with a colleague, and it was interesting to see, because I was in the leadership team and I oversaw a few hundred people, and it was interesting to see how challenging just that one trait or behavior was for the majority of people, to just assume positive intent, and how quickly we can move to this place of, that person's out to get me, or they're just trying to take my job, or they're just trying to get a discount, like whatever it is, right? And we can spiral into that. And in relationships, that's very true as well.
Even more,
Where
even
we
more
can,
so.
yeah. Even more so. But I wanted to kind of just pull back a little bit and go into what you were talking about, because when you look at the data around relationships and intimate relationships, especially amongst young people, it seems to be fragmenting more and more and more. That less young folks are getting into long-term relationships, and we see this specifically within men. That men between the ages of 18 and 29 are, they're dating less, they're having less sex than ever before. There's also a whole bunch of other things, like they're not going to college as much. But I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to what you think is happening within modern relationships, that there's so much more fragmentation than it, I guess to distill it down, it seems like relationships are harder to do than ever before. And
Yeah,
I'd love to hear, at least, I
that's an
mean, look,
illusion.
I'm not saying it is. I'm happily married. I've been happily married for, a long time now. But I think the consensus online, when you read comments and, look at the videos, it makes it seem like relationships have become so much harder. And I would love to hear your take on that. Maybe it's just pushback against that notion.
Well, first of all, you can't compare relationships because throughout history, relationships have had different meaning, right? During the Romantic period, suddenly, romance, true love, subjugated the church, which was a threat to the Catholic Church. Before that, it was we serve God, and here we're serving true love, right? Romeo and Juliet. The idea of marriage and the meaning of marriage changes over time and through around cultures and different countries and tribes. So that you can't really compare. You could say today there isn't a central organizing purpose of marriage, right? It's all over the place, and in the West, it's a hodgepodge of things, and that actually can cause problems, as I said, with couples coming together and not organizing, structuring it, shaping it, designing the relationship from the ground up. What's going to happen? They have two different ideas, perhaps, of what it should be, and they're going to fight. They're going to fight simply because they didn't design this thing, even though it is, in fact, a design problem, because there is nobody else that designed this thing but those two people. So left to our own devices, we do the least amount necessary in life. This is according to the biological laws of energy conservation, right? And so we're lazy. We don't really look at ourselves unless we're suffering. Who has time? We don't really check whether we're doing the same old things that our parents did, marching to the drums of others and not creating our own life. Most of us will never think about that, and we'll just do it. But nature will repeat itself again and again. And so people are difficult, and that's what makes different relationships difficult. The most difficult being the adult romantic primary attachment system. That is by far the most difficult and challenging, and we can talk about why that is. As to the other thing, every generation is reacting to the environment it's born into, right? And that environment starts with the parents. They're affected also the same way by their parents and their environment. So there's a kind of a global change, not just here in the West. Japan is far ahead of us in terms of no sex, no dating. They've been very much on a trajectory of avoidance and distancing, and have suffered the consequences of zero growth and also a high suicide rate. And so, this goes in phases. What we do know is that that human primates are herd animals. We have a biology that causes us to cling to each other. It's called attachment. And so we tend to be group animals. We're not lone wolves, unless we have some unfortunate history. And we tend to pair bond within herds. So I'm not worried that people aren't going to pair bond eventually. That seems to be a part of our biology and our history. But it also takes a lot of different forms. Polyamory, for instance, is not pair bonding. But we find that even in polyamorous systems and polygamy systems, there are primaries, two people who actually are the real go-to people when they're under stress. And so we know that we tend to be dyadically oriented when it comes to love, with exceptions, right? And so I think this, the world is turning, things change. They're changing more rapidly than ever before, that's for sure, because of technology and social media. But all of these things combine to the adaptation of the next generation, right? Something we're not entirely in control of. There are things that are bigger than us, but
yeah, it does seem like there's almost a kind of breakdown at a individual but also collective level of being able to just create social connections, period. And then that is trickling down into, our intimate relationships, where it's becoming harder and harder because there's this pressurization of this person needs to be almost everything for me now, because we don't have these other robust relationships that we used to have. And I think that this is true in many cases, but also specifically for men. I think, again, the data is showing that men are more and more lonely than ever before. And you mentioned Japan. I think that's very, very true there, where a lot of men in Japan have become quite isolated. And I think it's an interesting time also to have this kind of like social shrink, where social circles and social relationships and our capacity to just build and maintain relationships for many people has started to diminish or collapse in some capacity, where we have AI coming in. And I don't know if you saw this recent, there was a big news story that went around of this guy that proposed to his AI chatbot. Did you see that?
Oh, that's so romantic.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the gender reveal party.
I know, right? But he had programmed his AI bot, and he had a girlfriend and a 2-year-old child, and he programmed this bot, and then fell in love with it, and proposed to it, and the bot said yes, and it's this big emotional thing. But it was interesting because it's when I look at that from an attachment perspective, it's almost as though when we can't find attachments with people in our lives, we'll try and create these pseudo attachments with substances, behaviors, or artificial intelligence. So I know I'm kind of venturing off into a different field here, but
I have some thoughts about that.
Please.
As a researcher. So this is where attachment comes in. And again, attachment is also an adaptation to one's environment. Here, the environment is the caregivers upon whom we depend on, and their lack or having attachment values. So attachment values are very particular. We're turning out more distancing folk in the West. And that's no surprise, considering how we value independence. Don't tread on me, self-made man, all those things that are bullshit. And so it is not in line with our actual history and biology. We are actually more dependent on others than that. Anything else is an adaptation in childhood to attachment values. So we see this in countries. Japan has been tracked for decades now as moving in that direction of it's a collectivist society, but it's becoming very isolated and very cut off, right? And we could talk for a long time about how that is, why it is, and where it's going. But we're going there too. When you think about the conditions of our time, how little time we have to be present, little time we have to just hang with each other. We're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to screens. I am too. It is consuming all of our time, energy, and certainly, a lot of our dopamine. um, and so we're not hanging out. We're not even our tolerance for reading books or our tolerance for long form, dramas. Uh, our patience has drawn thin. We're becoming more attention deficit by the year as a country, um, because we look at our phones all the time. We're getting hunchbacks. We're becoming more myopic because we're only looking at short distances when we should be looking at short and long distances. So everything is adapting because of our technology and our way of engaging or not engaging with each other. That just is. So I'm heartened still by the fact that who we are still as people, we need people. Those of us who are in the distancing group, where we're not acclimated to being dependent, where it's an anathema, where we were trained out of that as infants. And to be sure, that training begins in infancy, having studied infants for a while. It's not a mystery. So you see these things happening right away. And is it against our nature? Yes. Is that nature still there? Yes, it is. Because we see when people age, they start to get a grip on what's most important. And they start to regret things they did in their relationships, hopefully before it's too late. We need other people. That's just a fact. We do better with other people than we ever can do on our own. That's a fact. We heal faster with people than we can on our own. Everything we do is better with another person or other people, as long as the conditions are correct, as long as we're playing well with each other, as long as we're collaborative and cooperative and we have the same purpose and the same vision as to what we are wanting. Otherwise, we're a mess. We just are.
Yeah, I think it's as you're saying that, I can't help but I'm a Canadian transplanted in America, but I can't help but look at the political divide in this country.
I can't wait to take over your home.
Yeah. Good luck. Us Canadians will come after you with hockey sticks and curling stones.
I would never. I'd be living in Canada before that happens.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But yeah, I mean, I see the political divide, and then again, I look at some of the relationship data, and you kind of see men and women just going in different directions in the political divide.
For now.
And then, and then you see some of the data of people being unwilling to date or marry somebody that has a different political preference than them. And I can't remember what it is.
That has to be parsed a bit, though.
Tell me more.
There are plenty of people on the opposite sides of the aisle, or they were, and they were just fine. What has changed is the culture and the norms where oppressed groups are now again in danger. That includes women, as the largest oppressed group, right? And then everybody else who isn't a white Christian or white male Christian. So it means more when somebody is married to someone who is from the extreme right or the extreme left, because they have a personal interest in terms of their identity, in terms of whether they're going to be safe, whether they're going to be included or not. And that's where it gets to be valid. If it didn't affect that, then no, it has no bearing on a relationship. They're just ideas. But this now is creeping into that, where people have history of abuse by fathers in it, or by the system. And so a vote for a person, a group that represents oppression, further oppression, and the taking away of rights, you can be sure is going to be, if the other person feels differently or is a part of that group, is going to be unacceptable. And that makes sense. That's fair.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I was listening to somebody talking about how it's kind of gone in waves, right? Where in America, people were less likely to marry somebody of a different race, and then that shifted, and that became more, more sort of socially accepted, and then it was less likely to marry somebody outside of their religious domain, and then that shifted, and now it's less likely to marry somebody outside of their political domain. So it does seem to be that it sort of cycles through different.
We cycle historically.
Yeah, and so I would imagine that hopefully we make it through this cycle, and we come out the other side, and that kind of dissipates. But okay, so how can couples, pulling this back into people in relationships, how can couples begin to create this kind of secure, functioning relationship that you're describing? Because I think that's really what everybody really wants. They want a functional relationship that is secure, that's sound. But I don't think that most people have thought about creating it in the way that you're talking about. So where should people begin?
At the beginning. Obviously not when dating, because it'll be a weird conversation to have. But I always recommend that people think about what would be the perfect relationship for them, having nothing to do with their partner or any person, right? Because that's what is going to matter. And then to actually write down what, as a couple, what we would do and what we would never do, right? So say all I need is someone who agrees with that, which is really secure functioning, right? It can be anything. We just have to agree. Otherwise, it won't work. So that's what I recommend, and start with safety and security first, of course, because if that falters, there is no doing business. There is no thriving. You're grounded at the level of survival. And that's dumb, because you might as well not be in a union where you're not guaranteed safety, because why do it? Right? If you're not going to be safe, why join a company where you could get killed, right? You might not want to do that, or join a group of cannibals. Maybe you want to join another group, because safety and security is going to be at the top of your list, unless money means more than your safety. So again, it's thinking about this stuff, but we don't have a society or a culture that even thinks about it when it comes to couples. It's the only union, free and fair union, of adults coming together as separate people, not blood, in a system that should be based on terms and conditions if it hopes to live and exist for a long time, and be happy continuously, and be durable. Those three things. I mean, a lot of people are in a relationship for a long time, but they're not happy, or one of them isn't, at least. Or it won't stand any load bearing. As soon as there's a lot of load bearing, the wheels will come off, and then they divorce. So those three have to be there, and only this idea it comes closest to what would guarantee that, if guarantee is even possible, would make it possible for that to happen. But there is no other way to make it happen. You and I, unless it's a dictatorship, have to design this from the ground up, or we're going to fight, because we'll be operating by implicit, tacit rules that neither of us are aware of, and we'll naturally fight. So we have to make sure, like any organization, that we are on board with why we're doing this. What's the big idea? What's the big plan? Where are we going? What do we represent? Are we a survival team? What is it? What's the point of us? Otherwise, we won't exist, because as emotional animals, if we're guided by only our emotions, that's where we do harm. We naturally will do harm to other people as we are, unless we organize, unless we clarify, unless we come up with real solid agreements as to how we're going to do business. It's not about it changing as a people. It's always about how we're going to do business. And so in each other's care, I really came to this, that the two main problems that afflict all relationships, love relationships in particular, maybe all relationships, is first the lack of organization or structure in terms of purpose and meaning. We don't know. We're flying a plane that's not built, or half built, which is dangerous. And that already is going to be our doom. So lack of organization by two adults co-creating a culture of their own, not somebody else's. The other is, and this is also very human, manner in which we all interact when one or both of us is under stress. This is a psychobiological and neurobiological issue that everyone needs to understand. That has to do with heart rate, has to do with blood pressure, has to do with history, memory, has to do with state, and it is uncompromising with all of us. And if you don't understand it, you'll fall victim to it, as we all do. And that's across the board. That's about education. That's about understanding how brilliant we are and how very stupid we are in other instances. Really, really faulty, error prone. And that is what's causing the majority of the problems. It's not bad will. It is our predilection for automation and working on memory throughout the day, hardly ever using critical thinking, which is too energy expending. Remember, energy conservation. So we're on automatic and we're reflexive. We're doing things without thought most of the time. And just so happens that can be very irritating or threatening or annoying, or to another person that we're dealing with up close. In fact, it will be. And so if we're not prepared for that difference, if we're not prepared for that fact that all people are irritating, a pain in the ass, a burden up close over time, disappointing, which is something that's in our heads only, that's going to happen, and that's not a problem. That we're completely different people. That's a fact. If we can't tolerate differences, we're not going to get along. If we can't tolerate pain without acting on it, we're not going to get along with others. If we can't accept losses that we have and grieve them, we're going to be angry forever and make everyone pay, right? So there are certain conditions that make it very hard to unionize or to, let's say, be in a troop, for instance. The military operates this way. You have to think collectivist, otherwise you're putting people's lives in danger, right? You're not important. The person to your left and right is more important because they'll save your life. So it's a forced culture of collectivism and interdependence. We don't have that in our culture, nowhere near it when it comes to love relationships. It's Wild West. And people expect that to work. And if you just even think about it, how could it? We're too unreliable as a species. We need containers. We need to create our own containers to keep us in line and to keep us focused and to keep us doing, keep the peace with each other. That has to be thought through. You can't just assume, plan for your angels and not plan for your devil. Plan for your devils.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you just made a great case for love's not enough.
Oh, love is clearly not. Not only that, everyone's definition of love is different. People kill in the name of love.
Totally.
Give me a break.
Yeah.
And I'm a romantic.
It's wild. Yeah. No, it's wild. I mean, I remember when my now wife and I were first dating, and I was in Vancouver and she was in Manhattan, and we were going back and forth and doing this long distance thing. And then it kind of got more serious and we had to sort of hash out who was going to move where, and it made more sense for me to come here. And then as things got even more serious, we were having conversations about, what marriage would look like and kids. And I kind of approached it from a very practical standpoint, where I said, here are some of my non-negotiables. And are you on board with that? Here's some of the things that I would like to do if we built a family. Are you on board with that? And one of them was I refused to raise kids in Manhattan. I just did not want to do that. It's not the life that I wanted young kids to have. We have 6 acres of land now. We moved upstate, and it's great, And so it's wonderful. But it was like those types of very practical things of here's some of the non-negotiables, or here's some of the things that I don't really like or don't want to have happen in our relationship, or here's what I would love for our relationship to look like. And getting on the same page, I think, was incredibly, incredibly important. And then as you were talking, we've been discussing also relocating our family, because we are pretty remote where we are. We're kind of like out in the boons. So it's great for really small kids because we've got a 4-year-old and a 10-month-old.
Turn it into a B&B and we'll go there. We'll rent it.
Yeah, there you go. I know. I like the little therapeutic retreat center for couples. Yeah, it's a good idea. And so, but we were having conversations, my wife and I, around like, where do we move? to raise our children, to send them to school and da, 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 da. And every time it would come up, it would just turn into this, like there was just disconnection, like a little bit of conflict would happen. It was disconnection. And I kept thinking, like, why is that happening? Why does that continue to happen? And then I realized that we weren't on the same page around our intention of what the move was actually about.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation. I was like, why do you think we should move? And we had to kind of hash that out. And so it's interesting because I think as you're talking, some of these things are just not things that we would normally even think about when we get into a relationship, because I don't know. What do you say to the people that tell you that it feels cold or calculated, or it's like too systematized or it's too business-like? Like when you get pushback around, do you ever get pushback around this?
No, because it depends on how you're casting each other. If you're casting each other as the big kahunas, the people who are in charge of everyone and everything, the leaders, the two generals, the two bosses, that comes with it a responsibility if you take it seriously. And therefore, everyone's depending on the two of you being able to make decisions properly, being able to solve problems quickly without trying to solve each other and getting into a fight, right? This has to do with being effective and efficient and powerful as a couple, right? It's about how you become powerful by decision, by design, by working together, and by little by little, continually making the relationship as easy as possible, because you can. It's really about the idea that two are always better than one if they are working well together. And that's the if, right? I don't think in terms of healthy, unhealthy relationships. I think it's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. Good or bad, right or wrong. I can only think of what works and what can't work among people, right? Anything that's unfair can't work. Anything that is lopsided in terms of power dynamics probably won't work in the long run. Anything that isn't win-win in a free and fair union of equals is going to fail. That means you and I have to make sure that we don't move until both of us are satisfied with the choice, the decision, so neither of us look backward and have to litigate something, as most couples are now doing, because they've accrued all this threat memory and unfairness, and that's all they can do now is to look backward and litigate the past, and that's because they didn't do this correctly. So again, prevention. Most everything we do that's stupid, that's going to harm us, is predictable and preventable. But do we predict it, even though we're the only animals on the planet that can do it? No, we don't. I mean, people are predictable. Do you think partners are predicting each other? No, they're not. They're walking live into the same situation again and again without any postmortems, without any plan, without any awareness that, hey, we're going to do it again. Or predict their kids, for that matter. Kids are
I think they're predicting the past patterns that they think they know about their partner.
That's the threat system. That's not an executive. That's not an executive function of the prefrontal cortex. That is a fear threat response based on memory. That's self-protection, and that is supposed to be mitigated by predicting, planning, and preparing for what could go wrong. So we don't build that up. That's why I love premarital. Start early. Because there is a biological problem here, that every time I feel threatened or you feel threatened by me or feel harmed by me and it's not repaired quickly, it goes into long-term memory, and you have no control over this. Your brain will build up a larger array of threat cues on which to anticipate the same thing happening the next time. You're going to do that automatically. So if we don't repair, if we keep repeating and we didn't put something in place to prevent repetition, it's going to snowball and get out of control. And that's hard to reverse, because these are lightning fast recognition systems that shoot first and ask questions later.
You've talked quite a bit about quick repair in your work.
It's a memory.
And can you speak to what quick repair might look like for a couple?
It's quite simple. It's elegant. And it's hard for human beings to do because of our pride and our insistence that our perception, our memory, our communication is absolutely the correct one. That's hubris, right? But we're all that way. So in a team, you can't be that way. You'll get kicked off the team, right? Cause and effect is not is everybody. So if you feel that I've harmed you in secure functioning, the relationship comes before my being right. If I want to preserve it, if I don't want to preserve it, I can do whatever I want. But if I want to keep this relationship, kid, partner, parent, whatever, I will respond to your perception as true. If it doesn't matter whether I think I said it, I think I did it. Doesn't matter whether I intended not to do that. It doesn't matter that person misunderstood what I was doing. All that matters in real life is that they felt harm, and that deserves, you know what, I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened. I can see why that would bother you. Full stop. Full stop. No, I did it because, but you don't understand. But if you didn't do that, if you didn't do this, I wouldn't have done that. That's the urge we all have. In parenting, with partners, that's us. And so it's a discipline, it's a higher order of social emotional functioning to put relationship, to be pro-self and pro-relationship at the same time. That's what is being called for. I have to take care of you and me at the same time, or I look like an adversary to you. Right? And that's how easy it is for us to be adversarial. People who know this, who are trained in this, negotiators, people who bring consensus makers, already know this. Most people don't. Most people are acting and reacting normally, which is pro-self only. And that's always hostile and threatening to another person. So that's just the way it is. And to not know that is to actually suffer consequences in our relationships. That's why I say we're better at war than we are at love. Because of this tendency to be overly pro-self under stress and stop being collaborative. By the way, there is a neurochemistry here. There is a neuroscience behind all of this that also is proven, that demonstrates with the even a little bit amount of hyper arousal in the sympathetic nervous system that triggers the hypothalamus to do its job in terms of fight or flight. There's a brain change. And that brain change includes neurotransmitters, especially that I don't give a damn about you. As soon as they're online, brain reorganizes in terms of its function. And I do not care about your interests. I only care about mine. I cannot put myself in your shoes. I won't cross the aisle. I will at all costs protect myself. That's in us all. It will happen. And if you don't know that, if you don't know how to keep that from happening or to stop it when it is happening, then like everyone else, you're going to be in a threat loop eventually and repeat everything again and again. That's normal. It's not, that is actually the human condition. There is no person who's not vulnerable to this.
So we create relational agreements and structure around how we're going to operate. It's funny because years ago...
Oh, I forgot to finish the apology, but go on.
No, it's okay. Years ago, I created, just working with men, I created something just called the conflict contract. And it was basically, how are you and your partner agreeing to go through conflict? And part of it was, just repair, like be the first to repair, and that both of you would commit to that. And that was part of it. And so it kind of sounds like that's a part of what you're talking about, is that you need to have agreements around how you're going to go through conflict together within the context of the relationship, and then adhere to those agreements. Yeah. But if you want to finish the repair and the repair, and then I would love to hear how this ties into mutual protection and what that can look like for a couple.
So when I explain this, hopefully the listener will believe that there is absolutely no upside to waiting too long to repair injuries, right? None. The longer it takes me to do this, the more likely that memory will go into long-term memory, where it will consolidate. Why? Because it's a threat memory. Our brains have a negativity bias from birth for survival. Therefore, we're going to encode negative experiences more strongly than positive ones. So therefore, I've created more trouble for myself because I didn't fix this in time. Now it's going to exist in your head to refer to that I did that by not fixing it. The relationship becomes more threatening the longer we are apart because we're practicing how we were done wrong. 2, 3. The existential threat that we experience as human primates because of the attachment system, the attachment biology, is such that we are going to be putting out a lot of stress hormones that cause cells to burn, wear and tear that you cannot get back. So all it does is creep you closer to death and to illness. That's all, right? It's going to make you sick. I don't care whether you feel fine. Your body's probably pumping out these chemicals, these hormones and neurotransmitters. There is nothing that is an upside other than pride, other than that. We're going to suffer if we don't fix it, not by litigating it, but by falling on our swords and apologizing for what we did and then move on. Or like a post-morbid, decide to put something in place to prevent either of us from doing that thing the next time, which is easily done.
How does some of this fit into mutual protection? Is this what you mean by mutual protection?
Mutual protection is a kind of solidarity in the face of anything that either of us feel is adversarial. So let's say you come to me and you're angry. This is because of who we are. You're angry. Someone did you wrong, and rather than say, "Oh my God, that asshole," and show a sign of solidarity with you first and foremost, I say, "Well, what did you do?" Or maybe they had a bad day. These things, no matter how you cut them, will never work with people who expect solidarity, fealty. Never. And knowing that also helps you to understand that this is a tactical matter, not a personal matter. Most everything I've been talking about now is tactical. What will work and what never works with people? Just find out for yourself. So you can give notes to that person afterward, later, when they've calmed down. But you better show that you're with them in that moment, or their gun starts to aim at you naturally. Protecting each other in public and private. I have to know what I can share with other people when you're not around. I can't just willy-nilly share information about you. That's violating, right? I don't have your permission. Let's say you are very private. I'm not. Well, you get to be private. I have to respect that. I can not be private, but not expose you. We can have it as we wish, but the rules are we protect each other in public and private, right? Even though you can say anything you want about me, that's fine. But I still need you to protect me in other instances. So I'm good with it. If you are in my home team, my family, you're not blood. When I'm with my blood relatives or my peeps, you're an outsider, especially in the beginning. If I'm not covering, if I'm not protecting you, that's going to live long as a gripe, right? I threw you under the bus. I didn't protect you as an outsider who's always a target by insiders, always a target for hostility, if there is to be hostility, right? And so there are just things to know. Again, I didn't make this up. This has been throughout history. We've seen this happen, and we know it's true. We just aren't oriented in love relationships to think this way. It's because we think we're family.
How do you think that men want to be protected, or what have you seen in terms of the way that men want to be protected in a relationship, but maybe sometimes don't communicate that?
Well, they'll communicate when you misstep. right? Everybody communicates when you misstep. They'll show in some way displeasure. They're not happy. You did something, right? And so in secure functioning, safety and security is the way you will feel safe and secure, not me. Everything is tailored to your sensibilities, not mine. That's very important because you're in my care. I'm in your care. We're different. But we find where we agree and where we are the same to come up with the principles that harness us, that guide us, that keep us in line, right? So this gets into a whole other thing of, again, a higher social emotional intelligence and personal moral system of being a consensus maker. Our human tendency is always to look where we disagree and where we're different. That is what we do. That is what we do. A higher level of this is to look at a higher level where we will agree and where we are the same. Otherwise, we would never unionize. This country would never have been a country if somebody didn't do that. The 13 colonies certainly weren't all interested in unionizing. They were fine. They didn't want to go to war. They had their own commerce. How would you get them to do all of that? You had to find where we all agree and where we have the same thing at stake. That's what unifies us. Only, that's it. And so that's another skill set. We can do pretty much everything by finding where we will agree and where we are the same, and then move down to the details where they are fine. But most of us start in the weeds with the details and never look to where we actually will agree. And that's kind of our stupidity, laziness.
What about for the guys that, because I just want to keep piecing this apart because I think this is such an important element to relationships. And I think this is a tough area maybe for some men who hear what you're saying and what we're talking about and say, well, protection is my responsibility as a man. How is my partner supposed to protect me? And so I think having some more sort of concrete examples of like, what would it look like for a partner?
You can have a relationship any way you want. You can be the master and commander of your relationship, male or female. The other person just has to also want it that way too. Otherwise it won't work. Again, this is all practical, tactical. It has nothing to do with personal, right? This is not getting in the way with what you value. Do whatever you wish. I don't care. You could be alcoholics and drug addicts. Fine, as long as you agree, right? If one of you has a problem, you both do, because it's not going to work, right? There's going to be a problem. If you want to be the protector, want to play a traditional male role, traditional Western American typically, role, you better find a female partner or a male partner, if that's your jam, who will be willing to play that complementary role with you. Otherwise, it won't work. It's all makes sense, right? This is a union of equals, and if you decide you're not, you have to agree that you're not. Otherwise, there will be trouble. So this is simply about compatibility based on what people believe is the most important to them, right? If I want monogamy and you want polyamory, neither of us are wrong. But if we can't come to terms with it, we can't do business. It'll be a cause for fighting, right? You want a baby, I never want a baby. If we go ahead without dealing with that deal breaker, we're going to suffer because that was an incompatibility until we made it not one, if we could. So just think, right? All you have to do is think. This is not about a value system, except fairness and justice between people, right? In a free and fair union. It has to remain that way. Otherwise, it is a dictatorship. Which works, by the way, except dictators eventually get killed. So think of that. Anyway, the point is, this is freedom. This is actually absolutely assuring to keep yourself. You're not surrendering anything. You just have to be pointing in the same fucking direction, folks. And so make sure you are. People never have the discussions at all. It's all implied. I thought you would have known better. I thought you would have known this is how you do relationships. What? you ever see a movie? Oh, it was great. It was George Siegel, and it was oh God, I can't remember his name. Anyway, it was a great movie where he has a mother who is now, infirmed and also demented, right? She has dementia. And he has a very young, pretty nurse who's coming to take over from the nurses that keep leaving because she's so horrible to be with. This woman is so beautiful. He's smitten. And and she says that she was married and she got the marriage annulled. And he said, "Oh, why?" And she says, "Well, everything was great except on our wedding night, we were in bed together, and when I got up in the morning, there was a big pile of poop in the bed, and I was shocked. And I said to him, 'What happened? Why'd you do that?' And he said, 'Doesn't everyone?'" The point being, there is no unified idea of what relationship should be because it's made up. And if you're going to be in a made up thing, you better make it up together or you get what you pay for. That's the point.
Were you talking about Where's Papa?
Yes, thank you. I think it's Mel Brooks.
I think so, yeah.
Brilliant, that scene. You can YouTube it.
Yeah, watch it on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, I love what you're talking about because I think in many ways, I do think that we all want to be whatever word you want to put on it, right? Honored, respected, protected, taken care of, tended to. I mean, there's so many different frames that we could put on this, but that is a kind of necessity, and being able to communicate what that looks like and sounds like, and the sort of intricacies of that is so important for the sanctity and just not even sanctity, just the connection of the relationship, the ongoing maintenance and connection of the relationship. How? Let's just pull an attachment here.
And by the way, we've mastered this throughout history in other areas of other unions. We've done all this. It's not new. Only couples don't do this.
Why is that? Is that just because of attachment? Because we have messed up attachment, or it's just not something that happens when you're a child?
There's no overriding cultural expectation of how you do relationship, love relationship anymore. It's all over the map. And so everyone is sort of free range. And it comes with it. The reason these romantic primary attachment relationships are the hardest is because they're most reminiscent subcortically of the earliest dependency relationship, and that's in infancy. That's why it's an existential matter, whether we realize it or not. That's a survival issue. So attachment is nature's glue. We confuse it with love. It isn't. It is a way of sticking together when we otherwise just go later. That's when you get attached to a dog, you get attached to a puppy, you get attached to a person, a kid, whatever. That attachment system assures that we're not going to split. So that's the good news. The bad news is it keeps us together even when we shouldn't be, when it's a bad deal. And so that's there's always a negative side to nature's positives. Nature is indifferent, right? Always. Dark side. That's the dark side of attachment. It makes us bend reality and to compromise our happiness in order to avoid what's felt to be an existential loss. And that's when our judgment is poor, and that's when we don't stand by a principle instead. And that's common, right? So relationships are sticky. Breaking up is hard to do, but it also becomes a problem in happiness and making things deal or no deal, which you're talking about a lifelong union to some. Boy, terms and conditions is all that's going to matter, because the chickens do come home to roost eventually if the relationship was too unfair and they never talked about it, never fixed it. It's predictable. So that's really what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything really new. It's really common sense. It's really everywhere in history and everywhere today. We can see it in action. We've probably seen it in ourselves. I say if you're a human primate, you're an asshole somewhere. And
It's just, yeah.
that's true of every hero, Mother Teresa, of everyone.
Yep.
On a bad day, we're not great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. Like the TLDR, the too long didn't read is, sort out some of these details ahead of time. I like the way that you said it, like the terms and conditions. What are the terms and conditions of our relationship and how we want to operate, how we're going to do conflict, how we are going to protect one another, how we're going to love on one another, like all of those different pieces. And when you lay that out, then you can see like, oh, actually, no, I'm not interested in what you are laying out, or actually I 100% in on that. Or yes, I can get there on this front, or clarifying questions. Go ahead.
Key example. I had a case, and I'll mix this up so nobody can know who it is, where the gentleman was older than the female. She had never been married. He had been married three times, and had all the money, but she was no slouch. She was successful, a businesswoman. She could sustain herself easily, but he had a ton of money. And he was very, very clear, which you got to respect. People have a hard time being clear, which makes it impossible to actually make decisions. He was very clear. I'm going to have a prenup where you get nothing during any of my money during this marriage or after. Right? You get nothing. Right? That's the way I'm going to insist. And I go, to this particular country every year. With a group of pals, and I engage in group sex or with prostitutes. I like that, and I tend to favor open marriages. I may or may not, but just so you know who you're dealing with, right? Very clear. You got to respect that. So that's easy. That really makes it easy for the other person to go deal or no deal. However, in this case, knowing everything, this woman wanted to be married for her own reasons, which overrode these things that were clearly not in her wheelhouse, clearly not a part of her personal culture. And I explained to both of them that that having sensed this and picked this up, that this would be a problem for both of them, not just one of them, right? Because he would pay the price if he missed this, that she's saying yes when it's not a full on board, right? There's a cost for that. And that she would pay the price too. Knowing that, they went on their way and they got married. My job is just to point out what I can see. And then people have a right to do whatever they want. But that's where you can easily predict a trajectory that is at some point in time, there's going to be a problem on either of those areas. I find that with prenups, though, I understand why they're there. And, I don't have a problem with the idea. But I've never seen, in my long experience doing this work, and this is all I do with couples, all my research is couples, I've never seen it not come back like a bad lunch every time. Because there's something about starting a relationship off with a lack of parity that sets things off in a way that one person doesn't have the same thing to lose or gain. That creates an opportunity for mischief. That creates an opportunity for resentment, envy, jealousy. It does. And therein lies a problem that I can't really say much about because people have a right to do what they want. But if people want to have a relationship from the start that is more than not likely to work in the long run, then my advice is that you decide that you share equal power and authority, right? The buck stops with both of you, 1. 2, that you make the relationship something greater than yourselves that must be protected at all costs, above and beyond everyone and everything else, because everyone and everything depends on you, right? That's made up. Therefore, your happiness comes first. You're in each other's care. Therefore, you, sir, are responsible for her ongoing felt sense of happiness in this relationship. You can't control it outside of it. And his ongoing felt sense of safety and security. That's your responsibility, not theirs, and vice versa. So it's like this. That everything that you do has to be good for me and good for you, or you're creating a problem, right? So what does that do? It forces us to think in a collaborative way. We have to be more clever. We have to actually think in a different way than we're accustomed to, which is like, if push comes to shove, I'm going to do what I want. That's what we do. Here, we're restraining ourselves. We can't do that. And if we are going to do that, I'm going to make you whole. I'm going to make it up now. So what I'm doing at your cost is already compensated for by what I'm offering you. Bargaining and negotiating. This is not transactional. I've thought very clearly about this on a moral level. It's not transactional because the purpose is to be a team and to work to please each other, not to get ahead, not to be a crime boss. And so it's a different level of personal moral operation of what's good, right, and what's best. All we have to do is agree and be honest about it. That works. And if you're putting things in place that will work as you move through time, like win-win, or we come first, the changes we go through time are still accounted for by those basic principles. Neither of us are going to lose. That takes away a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, a lot of threat, a lot of bad operations because of that fear. So that's what I would recommend.
I feel like that's a beautiful place for us to maybe pause round one, unless you have one more piece.
And one last thing, and I say this to people.
Please.
Reality is, and we have the capacity of not being in reality daily. It's called denial and automation, right? That's not a fault. It's just a thing. Reality is we always have lived in a dangerous world. We live in a world that is exploitive, opportunistic, doesn't care, nature doesn't care. And we're always at some point facing a danger, whether we know it or not. Therefore, the reason you and I make the fundamental agreement that we're going to protect each other, have each other's backs at all time, that it's you and me against the world, is because no one else will ever do that. Not my friends, not even my parents, because we don't have that social contract, right? There's no guarantee. It would be mutually assured destruction for both of us if we had that blood oath. Therefore, we're going to do it even when we least feel like it. That is what we're after. Our agreements must be made with the idea that we are going to do this when we hate each other, when we feel angry with each other, when we don't like each other, when we're not into each other, when we're thinking about how disappointing. No matter what, this will be done. That's a good life. That's safe. And that's how you make things happen. Otherwise, watch out. That's all I have to say. And that's me included. I'm a good guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I very much appreciate what you're saying. I think that's so very true. I would love to have you back on for round two. There's so much that we didn't even cover in today's conversation, but at some point, I'd love to have you back on. For the people that are out there listening, where would be the best place for them to go to learn more about you and your work?
The post office. My picture's up there. I'm wanted. Go to a website, PACT, P-A-C-T, Institute.com, thepactinstitute.com. There you can make appointments with me if you want to work with me therapeutically. You can be trained. This started off as training. I started off as a professor and training people in this in a psychobiological approach. Which we do worldwide. You can also do couple retreats. We have one coming up in Italy, 5-star couples retreat at a 5-star hotel, which is a castle outside of Milan, and they're always great. So look into that. And then we do online workshops, couples workshops. My wife and I do them where you can learn. And so everything is there for you.
Outstanding. We'll have the links for all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. I really appreciate you. And for everybody that's out there listening, definitely man it forward. This might be the podcast that you want to tune into with your significant other and have some conversations about. There might be some ideas that were sparked in terms of conversations, agreements, connections that were made during this conversation. So make sure that you man it forward with somebody in your life. And as always, until next week, Connor Beaton signing off.